great TV never gets old.
Now a WYFF News 4 weather special. Whipping winds, torrential rain. Hurricanes can pack a punch in the Carolinas. The WYFF News 4 weather team gets you ready for this hurricane season. Now, preparing for the storm.
Thanks for joining us for our Preparing for the Storm special. Hurricane season is a time to be prepared, even more so this year as we battle the COVID-19 pandemic. These are uncharted waters for us and for you. Figuring out how to be ready for a hurricane season looks a lot different right now. For example, taking shelter while staying socially distant is something new to all of us. In the next half hour, we're going to take a look at the past, present, and future of hurricanes in the Carolinas and show you how you can prepare under the current situations. Let's take a look at the past 4 years because they have been so active across the Carolinas and Georgia. Let's start back with 2016 with Hurricane Matthew that rode right up the coast here, causing significant damage. 2017, Irma made its way up through Florida, causing tornadoes here in the Carolinas. 2018, we had Hurricane Florence, a devastating flood storm here that made its way through the Carolinas and then right up through the upstate, causing severe weather. 2019, we had Hurricane Dorian that took a very similar path to Matthew just 3 years later, causing a lot of storm surge and flooding up and down the Georgia and Carolina coastlines. Now, most of our activity during hurricane season occurs during August and September. We can get storms as early as June, but they account for 5% of our named systems dating back to 1851. Now, hurricane season starts to wind down late October going into November, but the season goes all the way to the end of November. Now, starting in June, we usually get activity to form right here off the coast of the southeast. It's usually from these frontal boundaries that can cause lower pressure. By July, we start to get more activity back out toward the Caribbean or the Atlantic, and some of that can move up through the Gulf or graze us here in the Carolinas or the southeast. Now, by August, the ocean temperatures are getting warmer, so we start to get stronger activity and more activity that forms here. It can make its way through the Caribbean, the Atlantic, or go up through the Gulf right here. By September, we're at the peak of hurricane season. The temperatures in the Atlantic are the warmest of the year, and we start to get them to form back toward the African coast, and they move all the way through the Atlantic, giving us more time to track them, but also more time for them to get stronger. Sometimes they move through the Gulf, sometimes they move around the Atlantic, giving us dual threats. By October, we start to get some frontal boundaries that come through, which sometimes can sweep these storm systems out of the Caribbean up through the Gulf and graze Florida right in here. And then by November, we start to get hurricane season to calm down and some stronger fronts start to move on through, and we get some lower activity, but still, hurricane season can give us trouble all the way through the end of November. So how do hurricanes form? The ingredients begin forming before they begin to pop up on our radar and satellites. Our Cedric Haynes takes a look right now at how those ingredients come together and what keeps them going.
Well, let's get ready to approach the tropical season. Of course, a lot of folks want to know, what are the ingredients to actually form those hurricanes? Well, of course, as we look out into the Atlantic Ocean, the first thing we look for are the warm ocean water temperatures. When you start seeing the water temperatures getting at about 80 degrees or higher, that is perfect fuel for these hurricanes to really thrive. Then we look for rising air. That rising air where the air collides and creates that lift, that also creates thunderstorms. And thunderstorm complexes come together, and that's what creates those actual tropical systems. Hurricanes are born from clusters of thunderstorms. Of course, with light winds, those light winds help to steer those tropical systems across what direction that they may go. And of course, when they avoid land for a long period of time, that allows for those storms to really strengthen. So those are several of the ingredients we look for to form a hurricane. From that, we get the steps of a hurricane. Of course, it starts off with that cluster of thunderstorm activity. It becomes a little more organized, so we get a tropical disturbance to form. From that, we get a tropical depression to develop. That's when that storm is not only organized, but then you also start to get winds at about 38 miles per hour or less. So not very strong with the winds, but can produce a lot of heavy rain. Then comes the tropical storm. That's when you get winds anywhere between 39 to 73 miles per hour. Lots of heavy rain, even some wind damage is possible with tropical storms. And next, we have the hurricane. Of course, that's any storm with winds over 75 miles per hour, and we know that can produce lots of damage. Those are the steps to forming a hurricane.
Thanks, Cedric. How hurricanes form impacts how strong they are and what damage they're capable of causing. But when we say a Category 3 or 4 storm is headed for the coast, what does that mean? Here's meteorologist Dale Gilbert with a breakdown of the Saffir-Simpson scale.
Back in the 1970s, two guys by the name of Herb Saffir, who was a wind engineer, and Bob Simpson, a meteorologist, came up with a chart to show wind speeds of hurricanes and the intensity and the destruction they can cause, and to put them into different categories. From Category 1 being the weakest, from a minimal hurricane at 74-mile-per-hour winds, to Category 5 being a super hurricane with 157-mile-per-hour winds. Let's talk about those different categories. In Category 1, we start to get damage to power poles, trees, some minimal damage to homes, and it typically will go from 74-mile-per-hour winds to 95-mile-per-hour winds. So there's minor home damage and tree branches, and most homes can survive a Category 1. Now, Category 2 hurricanes, that's when we start to see a storm surge that can do damage. We've got more trees that are falling, roof and siding damage to homes, significant power loss, one of the biggest concerns, and any kind of storm surge can lead to homes being out of use for a while until they're repaired. Category 3, we call those major hurricanes because the damage really amps up now with a stronger storm surge causing more damage to homes, fallen trees, blocking roads, power outages that can last for days and weeks on end. So Category 3, we call those major hurricanes, and each year we get 2 to 3 of those. Rarer are the Category 4 hurricanes. You can see the homes being destroyed now with roofs being blown off. Most trees are down, and that higher storm surge causes flooding. Many homes is totally destroyed in the process. And Category 5, we had one last year. Remember Dorian that hit the Bahamas? It just causes utter devastation, destroying homes, trees, downs, and power outages last for weeks and months. So recovery much harder with a Category 5. And that's a quick look at the Saffir-Simpson scale.
Thanks, Dale. Now, when we start talking about strong hurricanes making landfall, that is likely to mean people will have to take shelter. FEMA has put out guidelines related to COVID-19 and seeking shelter. You should be prepared to take cleaning items like soap, hand sanitizers, and disinfecting wipes with you. If you do have to go to a shelter, remember the current CDC guidelines and try to stay 6 feet apart from people who aren't your immediate family. FEMA is also recommending that if you are in a shelter, anyone over the age of 2 wear a face covering. When hurricanes do hit our region, one of the main concerns we have is flooding, and rescue crews are acutely aware of that. Our Perella Lewis joins us with what they're doing ahead of the season.
25 hurricanes have hit South Carolina's coast this century, with Hurricane Hugo being the deadliest and Hurricane Francis spawning a record 45 tornadoes. Hurricanes are a real threat for our area, and one of the biggest dangers that comes with these storms is flooding. Here's a look at the people who train to save lives when threatening conditions come to our coast. Storm surge, rip currents, and fast rising water often covers roads and destroys homes. It's one of the deadliest aspects of hurricanes that can call for emergency crews to provide life-saving measures. The Greenville County Sheriff's Office trains for this exact scenario, where swift-moving water pulls people down raging rivers and roadways without warning.
Moving water is dangerous. You can be pinned against rocks, you can get pinned against logs, and those types of things, which can become what we call strainers, could be on top of the water where you could see them, could be just below the surface where you might not see them.
With an average of 20 calls every year, this team has to stay ready.
We have a lot of water, not necessarily just here in Greenville County, but across the state, and water rescue is one of those areas that becomes manpower intensive very quickly, and you can burn through personnel very quickly.
Drills like this show the power of moving water and why things like throw bags and boats are also used in rescue.
The last thing we want to do is get in the water. If we can rescue you from the bank or from a boat, that's really going to be our preference.
Inland flooding causes the most deaths during hurricanes due to rapidly rising water and that makes training like this extremely important.
Hurricane rescues are a high risk.
Rick Burgess also helps train emergency crews and says hurricanes are one of his main calls to action.
What we have found in the past, in the previous hurricanes, is people do not want to evacuate when they're asked to evacuate. Then when the rescue calls come in, the emergency personnel get overwhelmed on all the calls that's coming in.
He says that the coast can be especially dangerous because it's flatter than the upstate and water stays longer.
In the lower part of the state, it can last up to weeks, sometimes up to 2 weeks, because the water has nowhere to wash out.
Burgess recommends having multiple evacuation plans ready to go, and
we teach our rescuers, if you have water in the roadway and you cannot see the lines on the road, then don't drive through it.
good advice from people who are on the front lines when severe weather hits. And as with any severe weather, it's always a good idea to prepare before it happens. Here are a few things you can do now to be ready for hurricane season. Have extra supplies of water and non-perishable food items and extra medication if needed. Make sure your flashlights have fresh batteries in case you lose power. Also, be sure to secure your home and have a full tank of gas in case you need to leave in a hurry.
Thanks, Perella. We prepare for hurricane season using the information we've learned from past storms. Hurricane Hugo, Ivan, Matthew, and Florence, all names people in the Carolinas and Georgia won't soon forget. Coming up, we'll take a look at the impact they had in our area.
Preparing for the storm.
Welcome back. During hurricane season, you will often hear us refer to computer models, the guidance we use to develop a forecast for hurricanes. Meteorologist Cedric Haynes joins us right now with a model breakdown.
Well, as we get ready to continue to approach tropical season, you may hear us mention different computer models as we go throughout the season. So what do we actually mean when we say that? Well, we get dozens of different models that take a look at calculations and kind of gives us an idea of what may happen in the future of our atmosphere. So dozens of models, that's what we review in the Weather Center. Now with that, we have two main sets of models we look at. One is the GFS, the other is the European model. Those are the two that you will hear us use often. Now, the GFS is the American computer model made right here in America that gives us all the big calculations of what's going to happen in the future. The European model is one that measures what's going on across the globe and gives us an idea of what may affect us down the line. Now, from those two main computer models, we have something called ensembles. What are ensembles? They're basically multiple options from the two main computer models. So what happens is we take a snapshot of the atmosphere and we project in the future, and just like if you look farther out in the future, you're going to see that cone widening because, yeah, there are many more options that could occur the farther out you get. Now, to give you a better idea, a picture of this, here's a look at the two main computer models plotted on the same map. This is around the same time frame. One model here in blue, that's the European model. The other model in red, that's the GFS. Notice, even with these two models, there are still significant differences that can sometimes arise. One would be the size and strength of a system, also the actual placement of where the center may be at a certain time. So we watch for that, but within those two models, again, remember I mentioned the ensemble. So what is that? Well, take a look at this. As you can see here, this would be our main model, so the European model's main projection here, but notice there are several other little models. Those are the ensembles, multiple other options that could happen at the same time frame. But notice they're clustered together, but also notice how close they are to the coastline of Florida there. So as you can see, as we get farther out in time, those models being closer together gives us an idea of where the main trend may happen. So we look at all of that data to give you a better idea of what you can expect with these tropical systems.
Each hurricane that forms is unique, and each one teaches us something that helps us when forecasting the next system. Let's break down 4 of the top hurricanes to impact the Carolinas and Georgia. Hurricane Hugo, the storm Carolina hurricanes are measured by, made landfall near Charleston on September 22nd, 1989 as a major Category 4 hurricane. Winds got up to 140 miles per hour and had a storm surge of near 20 feet. Just 6 hours after landfall, Hugo reached Charlotte as a Category 1 hurricane with winds of 99 miles per hour. Hugo wiped out electricity for weeks and killed 35 people in South Carolina. In September 2004, Hurricane Ivan tracked through the Western Carolinas just 8 days after Hurricane Francis. More than 20 inches of rain fell in western North Carolina, causing homes to slide right off the mountains. Mudslides blocked highways, isolating mountain communities for weeks without supplies or electricities. Portions of the Biltmore Village were underwater. The city of Asheville without drinking water for days. 11 people lost their lives in western North Carolina and 140 homes were destroyed. Hurricane Matthew in 2016 tracked along the Florida, Georgia, and Carolina coasts. It made landfall in McClellanville, South Carolina as a Category 1. Storm surge and flooding impacts destroyed many piers along the Grand Strand from Surfside to North Myrtle Beach. Matthew took the lives of 25 in North Carolina and 4 in South Carolina. In September of 2018, Hurricane Florence was a major Category 4 with winds up to 150 miles per hour, prompting the evacuation of nearly 500,000 along the coast. Florence, a Category 1 at landfall over Wrightsville Beach, was a slow mover. A record 20 to 30 inches of rain fell along the coast with devastating storm surge. Parts of I-95 and I-40 were impassable for days. Damage amounted to $16.7 billion in North Carolina and $607 million in South Carolina. 42 lives were lost in North Carolina and 9 in South Carolina. When hurricanes strike, many often think of the coast. However, here at home in the Western Carolinas and Georgia, hurricanes can be destructive, and it has a lot to do with our geography. Meteorologist Cedric Haynes has more from Sky 4.
What better way to show you the impacts of tropical systems than to give you a bird's eye perspective, high above, from Sky 4. As you can see, in this area just east of Hendersonville, in the Hickory Nut Gorge, you'll find beautiful mountains, rivers, and even lakes. All of these features are nice, but they can turn dangerous in just seconds. Take a look at some of this video here. This is from September of 1996, when, yes, the remnants of Hurricane Fran brought treacherous weather to this area. The system brought some of the worst flooding these mountains have ever seen. The flood happened after dark with nearly a foot of rain in just 3 hours. In fact, the Broad River rose from 2 feet to nearly 20 feet. This system caused over $2 million in damage. Then came September 2004, where the area saw 2 hurricanes, only separated by 8 days. Rain totals are in the 20-inch range in portions of the mountains, leading to many mudslides, highways blocked, and many stranded for weeks. In fact, so much rain fell, the city of Asheville had no fresh drinking water for days. Another look over the area, you can see the problem. These mountains, they're steep, very steep, and all the rain goes down into one place, the local rivers. Now, things are safer today compared to then, thanks to local officials really stepping up the game, including getting new river gauges to monitor the river levels, and also new sirens to alert residents who live along the river of potential dangerous situations. Reporting from high above in Sky 4, for WYFF News 4, I'm meteorologist Cedric Haynes.
The names of hurricanes spark memories for people across the country. Hurricane Hugo on our coast, Hurricane Harvey in Texas. Coming up in just a minute, we're going to take a look at how those hurricanes get their names and what storms could head our way this season.
Preparing for the storm.
Across the state of South Carolina.
Welcome back. Each hurricane has a different name, and they're not just chosen at random. Our Dill Gilbert gives us a preview of the storms that could come our way.
Hurricane season begins the 1st of June, goes to the end of November, and the National Hurricane Center has released this year's list of names. The 2020 season begins with the name of Arthur. As you can see, they alternate between boy and girl names. There are 21 names on each year's list. Should we have more storms than that, then we go into the Greek alphabet, alpha, beta, gamma, but it's rare when that happens. But again, should any of these storms become very deadly or destructive, then they become part of weather history, like Katrina and Andrew And here just recently, we had Florence and Michael. Those names will never be used again because now they're a part of weather history. Tropical storms begin with the winds around a big low in the tropics, get up to 39-mile-per-hour winds. And as it continues to grow, at 74, it would become a hurricane, but it keeps the same name through the life of the storm. And this year's list all set to go with hurricane season beginning on June 1st.
Thank you, Dale. Now the big question, what will this year look like? Coming up in just a moment, we'll share our hurricane season forecast and tell you how you'll need to prepare.
Preparing for the storm.
WYFF News 4 today.
Welcome back. If a tropical storm or hurricane is heading our way, you'll likely hear us designate impact or alert days. When you see these yellow icons, it means it's an impact day. That means out of the ordinary weather is expected. This will let you know the hours and the days we expect especially impactful weather. Examples of that are especially cold or hot days, a washout with rain or windy days. That brings us to alert days. Anytime you see the red icon, it means that strong and severe weather is likely to impact you and your family. The red icon appears when dangerous weather is expected. Weather conditions that would prompt an alert day: flooding, tornadoes, tropical storms, and hurricanes. That brings us to our forecast. What really plays into our forecast this year is the El Nino factor. Anytime we have an El Nino weather pattern, those strong winds with an active jet oftentimes can provide lots of wind shear that oftentimes tear apart hurricanes. The problem with this year, we don't have an El Nino. There is less working against the storms. We're going into a neutral or a La Nina year, which means it's a relaxed jet stream, giving those storms a better opportunity to form. On top of that, we've got above average sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic going way out. Temperatures are already running way above where they should be this time of the year. Same story with the Gulf and the Caribbean. Both of those are running above normal. So the headlines for this year: a warmer water temperature means more activity is expected, and potentially with warmer water temperatures, those storms that do form could be stronger. El Nino is absent, which can help limit those storms. Now, the hurricane forecast for this year calls for an above average season. Our forecast is for 18 named storms, 8 hurricanes, and 4 of those becoming major hurricanes. So we're going to stay on top of this throughout the entire year and keep you posted as any kind of threats come our way, both on air and online. Now, hurricane season this year. Make sure you go ahead and download our WYFF4 mobile app. You can find it for free right now. Just take seconds to download. Head on over to your app store, and you can use it right there. Anytime severe weather heads our way, you'll be alerted. Thank you for joining us for this special Preparing for the Storm. As always, our weather team is committed to keeping you and your family safe.
Preparing